Welcome to FO Talks. With me is none other than Francisco Jimenez, a very dear friend who has been friends with me since the days I started Fair Observer. Of course, he has gone on to have a glorious academic career. He has taught and still teaches at the University of Salamanca. Right now, he's in Portugal. He's the author of many books. And today we will be discussing the US elections. So, welcome, Francisco.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me today.
Well, it's an honor. So, Francisco, I know you have a very tight calendar today, a very tight schedule today. So, we'll get straight into it. What is the reaction to Donald Trump's victory in Europe? Because one joke going around is, look, the moment Trump got elected, the German government fell.
Before the election, I was puzzled reading some polls, analyzing the conservative electorate and the progressive electorate, Spanish progressive, Spanish conservative perception of U.S. election, and majority, even the conservatives, dislike the idea of Trump being elected. Only Vox, which is extreme right, according to that poll, around 57 or 60, thought that that could be or could offer some positive impact for Spain. The rest, again, even conservative followers of Partido Popular, the Conservative Party, dislike the idea. And I assume that that could be the same, could be equal in Portugal, or in, well, I wouldn't say in Italy because, the political spectrum is more complex, but I'm pretty sure in France, not the Le Pen supporters, because they are aligned together with Vox Orban followers. So to summarize, I think the reaction has been of a bit of surprise because, the polls were indicating a more equal result or possible Kamala victory. First reaction is surprise. Second, well, officially, both von der Leyen and Josep Borrell have say congratulations, Donald Trump. But now let's see what happens in the future to come, and which be the following step from this European side.
So that's interesting because the reactions I'm getting from Germany, from France, from the Netherlands, from most of Europe, with exceptions in Eastern Europe and Italy. In Italy, Giorgia Meloni's party, and yeah, many Italians seem to be fine with Trump, and of course, many Eastern Europeans think he'll be all right. But some of them are very, very worried, even in Eastern Europe. Some of them are very worried that he'll make a deal with Russia over Ukraine. So in Europe, on the whole, there's a lot of worry. There is doubt about Donald Trump's commitment to NATO. And there is fear, and I would say in some cases, terror of his protectionist agenda. As we know, you are sitting, as we know, and you're sitting in Europe, you know this better than me, that European economies are not doing that well. Germany is going through deindustrialization. There are headlines like Mittelstand has become Mittelkaput. We are seeing the death of German industry and so on and so forth. North Italy is suffering, which is where you had industry. Spain isn't doing that well economically either. So all of the EU is going through some form of economic trouble. And the fear of a protectionist America is really high. And we've seen that the Inflation Reduction Act under Joe Biden did damage European economies. So my question to you is, paint me a picture of how Europeans, and I know it's a broad question, there are so many different countries and languages, but how, say, the key players and the dominant analysts in Europe view the next 4 years of Donald Trump.
Hmm. Well, first, a little detail about the economic landscape, because it's very interesting what you said. Sometimes there are the data and then the perception of the people.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember accurately, but if I'm wrong, 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, the Spanish economic minister was in Washington, and International Monetary Foundation, they predict the growth.
Yeah, International Monetary Fund. Yeah, they
Yes,
in Washington
Spain,
D.C. their annual meeting. Yeah,
according to that figure, Spain was among the countries that had better economic situation right now, with a 2.8% of growth. Behind was the United States. But my point is, and this is another topic, in
got it.
this very biased disinformation atmosphere, that's why your project I was in love with from the very beginning. This media, this atmosphere, in which is very difficult for the citizen to distinguish the truth than the disinformation,
Yeah,
the data than the narrative.
got it.
US was recovering pretty well in the last 2 years, 3 years after the pandemic, and US was growing. But it's true that inflation was important.
Yeah,
But at least in the Spanish case that I know better, the economy is doing well now. I don't know how long it will last, but people, if you look to the people in the street, people say, economy is terrible, the situation is worse,
understood.
because the media, especially some specific media, are like bombing with this is a dire situation, everything is
Yeah.
collapsing. So just I wanted to
Yeah.
clarify that
But,
now.
but but that may hold true for Spain. My point is Germany things are bad.
Yes,
I've just come back from Germany
you are
and
totally
things are
right.
really bad in Germany. Everyone agrees. The data is bad. The
You
business
are
owners tell you stuff off the record, and the government has collapsed.
you are totally right. Actually, that figure I was mentioning
Yeah.
was indicating that Germany was in bad situation. Anyway, to answer your question, here is my thought. Probably is kind of wishful thinking.
Yes.
February 2022, Ukraine is invaded by Russia. Perhaps no one in Moscow thought that the European Union would have reacted as quick as they did, in terms of, it's a big group of 27 countries with many different details and difference. European Union reacted well, and well, quickly. My guess is that perhaps if Euro-transatlantic ties are tightened or are forced or are put into tension by Donald Trump's new administration, hopefully the European Union would try to uh, offer a common answer to that threat. Again, I know that this could pose a part of wishful thinking ingredient in my answer, but it's a question, as we say in Spanish, from the need, you do the virtue. The proverb say like, from the need to make some virtue. It's not that
Yeah,
you are
yeah.
willing,
Necessity is the mother of invention, or necessity leads
yes,
to
you are not
virtue.
willingly, or in other situation you will have not taken
Yeah.
that road. But and then as for the
But I
NATO,
mean, to your point, I mean, the EU has seen an $800 billion proposal for a new industrial policy by Mario Draghi. The Mario Draghi report is nearly 400 pages long.
Mhm.
And already people in Europe are thinking of a response because they see there is an industrial policy in China towards the east. They see there's an industrial policy in the west, in the US. So they are talking about broadening and deepening capital markets. They are talking about improving industry and focusing on many sectors. I mean, so there's already thinking going along these lines as to how to revive the European economy.
Hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And actually, I think we could put the starting point of that policies during the pandemic. No, European Union, European society, European citizens were shocked by the fact. Just give me this example. Let me give this example. Penicillin, that is vital for any disease. According to the figure I had in mind, was 85 or 90% produced outside of Europe. So that was a kind of sign of alarm. And again, it's not that now dragging with this lengthy report for 400 pages. During the pandemic, that the European Union started to be aware of the need of recovering the control of sand production. In other words, to try to be more autonomous from, let's say, Chinese supplier or Indian or United States supplier. But now my question for you, because you are, again, much more knowledgeable about international relations, don't you think that this kind of this de-globalization process in which there are three different areas or some that are trying to gather or create synergies in between them, but they are distancing themselves from the other group, let's say, is Asia, China, Russia. I don't know how you would put India in this map.
India
Then,
is trying to play all sides right now and come up with a policy that maximizes its national interest.
so you don't foresee a Indian government getting a bit closer to China, Russia in the forthcoming.
They have already eased border ties. So let's talk about deglobalization, because I was in Geneva and I talked to people in WTO, World Trade Organization, and a lot of them talked about how the WTO is completely broken because this is now not an age of trade, not an age of liberalization, not an age of globalization. The US has blocked appointment of appellate judges, which means if two countries have a dispute, there's no place they can go to settle. So the WTO is practically defanged. So the US does one good thing in saying that we've created or has done one good thing in the past, which is create a norms-based order. And in many ways, yes, those norms are biased towards the US, but that norms-based order means that it's not entirely might is right. So great, well done, full marks for creating some international institution. But the problem with the US in recent years is that it's tried to have its cake and eat it too. So it's been undermining these institutions. So we saw that in Iraq. We'll go to war whether the UN agrees or doesn't agree. And then, of course, sign climate accords. And one day you sign it, the other day you walk out of it. Sign something as big as the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which, as you know, I was in Tokyo for a while, which has upset the Japanese deeply and made them lose faith in the US because they really worked hard for the TPP for not just years, but over a decade. And so you get to all of these, litany of broken promises, and then of course you undermine the WTO, which is one of the bedrocks of the post World War II order. So naturally, countries are forming blocs. Naturally, there are fears. Tariffs are up. And I think part of it is because globalization wasn't just a win-win for everyone. There were losers in globalization. I think when the economists at Harvard did not pay attention to the losers, they were being intellectually dishonest, and or they were just being elitist. And those losers are often the voters of Donald Trump and other populist parties. So protectionism is back, and is that necessarily a good thing? Not entirely. But having said that, is extreme free trade the answer, wherein all your hospital supplies come from China? Is that the answer? No. So I think we'll have to find a balance somewhere wherein you need some security of supply chains, but then you also need some amount of trade, because as we know, and this is something that struck me, Martin Plaut is the former Africa editor of the BBC, and I did a few podcasts with him. So viewers can listen to Martin Plaut's podcast. He did one on the Horn of Africa. We did one on South African history. And Martin sent me actually, a beautiful statue of the Buddha found actually in modern day Scandinavia. And so trade has existed for centuries. So we can't do without it.
Let me give you an example of even more, all this example of, I quote this in class one time. nearby where my parents live, what was it, like 3 years ago, was an
This is
archaeological,
Extremadura in Spain.
yeah, archaeological site. It's
Mm.
called Turuñuelo. That, remember that name because it will be famous in the forthcoming year. Why? Many things, but first,
Yeah.
the concrete historically has been attributed to the Roman Empire.
Mm.
Apparently, these guys, Tartessos, is a civilization is also mentioned in the Bible, but supposedly they disappear in the middle of nowhere. So in this archaeological site, they have discovered that the concrete was being used before the Roman invented. Second thing,
Wow.
yes, I can send you later on by WhatsApp. They have
Mm.
found a marble faces from Greece, 3,000 kilometers through the Mediterranean, 2,000 years before Rome. So that means it's another, literal globalization through
Got it.
the Mediterranean Sea. Coming back to our discussion, I would like to emphasize and also listen to your opinion. Why so many people, so blue collar workers, Afro Americans, and Latinos have voted for Trump, supposedly unexpectedly, or at least the polls haven't taken that sensation, that feeling. I have some thought, but also would like to listen to yours. My first point is, as for the Latinos, because I was in
Mm.
Washington this summer, it,
Yes, of course.
it's kind of paradox. It's a kind of paradox from me because I have many friends Latinos, and when they ask them why you think that Trump is pinpointing you, why you think Trump is blaming you, and they instinctively, most of them say no, they are not talking about us. They are talking about other migrants and say, well, Trump is talking about Latinos and you are Latino. Well, but perhaps it's another migrant. So that made me think about a sociological theory. I don't know how you say in English, but it's called like,
Yeah, yeah.
uh,
Sociological theory is precisely right. Your English is much better than you
no,
claim it to be.
no, but let me put this is translated from Spanish is like the second last or the penultimate fears the last one. In other words,
Yeah,
the Latinos that were living in the state for 5 years, 6 years, they started to fear the last one who arrived, either if they
right.
were from IT or they were from East Asia. And
Yeah,
Trump has purposely uh, touched that feeling. And
yeah,
again, that happened in Spain during the 80s, happened in Germany. So it's a kind of human condition that you start to, if you are a minority, you have lived already couple of years or few years in a country, you start to feel skeptical to the last one to arrive. That's why I say the last second to arrive at the penultimate first the last one, because they think, oh, that perhaps they are going to take over social benefit or they are going to steal our jobs.
correct.
I haven't read yet an analysis from this perspective, but with this anecdote this summer, I think this is the case with these Latinos that have voted for Trump, and they consider not the part of Trump propaganda when Trump is blaming Latinos of being rapers and drugs dealers. So,
Yes. So it's very interesting you mentioned immigration. Gallup consistently put immigration as a top concern, not just for um, Republicans, but even for some Democrats. And it was the top concern for American voters. Of course, inflation was the other concern. And we have
yes.
a graph, FOI, the Geopolitical and Political Risk um, Advisory Firm, and you can see it on you can see that graph on our on the on our page on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
Um, has that differential. Food inflation throughout Biden's presidency was consistently higher than earnings. And that is scary. Why? Because it meant that, yes, although you had jobs, although you had job growth, although you had economic growth, that didn't wash down in earnings. Um, People got new jobs, but they weren't exactly jobs as in the factories of the past. And immigration often scares people, and immigration and trade are related because let's be honest, when immigrants come on an H-1B visa, um, uh, they bring great benefits to the economy. They bring in new skills. They often become entrepreneurs. But one of the downsides, which I hear all the time, and Republicans talk about it, is that look, they do the job 60, 70% of the price of someone who's an American citizen. So they are undercutting local labor. Element of truth there.
Indeed, one of the most,
So
sorry for interrupting.
please, no, please.
No, that made me think of another catchy Trump logo that was literary, saying something like, they are taking Afro-American jobs. That precisely is what you mean,
Yes,
right?
exactly. So that fear of you may lose your job remains, especially in a country where you don't have universal health care, especially in a country
I
where
know. I suffer.
where childcare costs a lot, where healthcare costs a lot, where education costs a lot. Your uh, health insurance is tied to a job. If you're white collar, if you're blue collar, well, if you lose your job, you may be on the road, homeless. So the reality is, Americans are just 2 or 3 paychecks away from homelessness, from complete ruin. And surveys have shown that a huge percentage of Americans don't even have $500 to
Absolutely.
spend in fair.
I love that sentence, and I'm gonna quote you. 2 or 3 paycheck of
Away.
homeless. No, listen, because I
Yeah,
experienced that when I was living there, when I first arrived, especially in 2007, I was puzzled by the number of homeless. It was incomparable, higher than any other European city I had traveled before. And there is part of the sunshine of landscape of the
you should tell our viewers and listeners about your medical bill trauma,
indeed,
which which
indeed,
ruins so many
indeed.
Americans.
I was about, to be honest, to leave Washington and escape from that crazy amount because I was not really ready to pay. I had not the money to pay.
Yeah,
Finally, it was paid by my insurance, but was covered by the Fulbright grant. But it was a labyrinthic process,
yeah,
3 or 4 months. I was totally in shock because it's
yeah.
totally
I
different.
think you suffered more because of that bill than from your illness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're totally right. And I had to negotiate, I had to bargain, I had to say, listen, I'm gonna hire a lawyer. That was a kind of, back and forth. At the end, I paid nothing because everything was covered by the insurance, but almost 4 months. I don't know how many hours, phone calls, email, wasted time, headache.
And so that brings us to two very key issues. One, it is true that in America you have a cost of living crisis. It is true in America you do have not just an administrative state, you have an administrative um, big company bureaucracy that is Kafkaesque to deal with. And I know people who've not lived in America will not understand it. They see it, oh, how can Americans be so stupid? But maybe Americans are not being stupid. Why? Because they are voting in anger, perhaps. They're not voting because Donald Trump is a brilliant guy like Franklin Delano Roosevelt who has the New Deal. No. But what they are angry about is that, okay, the Democrats come to power, they promise to represent the working class, but they are an elite managerial class who went to Harvard and Yale. So hypocrisy is something human nature rebels against. Whilst
Mhm.
Trump is a crook, but he's openly a crook. He ran beauty pageants. It's okay. We accept him. And of course, it's not as simple as that. Trump has many, many, many faults, but the Democrats no longer represent the working classes. They do not reflect the concerns about immigration, and immigration is a concern. They do not accept that they never tackled the problem of inflation head on. They were too involved in cultural wars, pronouns, transgender. A boy can become a girl and vice versa. And people said, hang on a minute, there are kitchen table issues you're not even talking about.
Absolutely.
Um, they they continued with Biden, who was old and infirm,
But
and kept saying, oh, he'll be all right. And then suddenly had Kamala parachuting. And Kamala Harris, you've read my piece from 2022, is completely unsuitable to be president. And look at what happened, transpired. They lost 14 million votes
absolutely,
since last election. They
yeah,
went from 81 million votes to the Democratic Party to
yeah.
67
But
million.
there are other factors in that loss, and I would say a big percentage of that is related to the pro-Israel policy of Biden administration, especially in some states where the Muslim American have,
And Arab Americans and young Americans. I mean, look,
yes, either
I mean, the
voted for
great John Mearsheimer, the great Professor John Mearsheimer,
sure,
did not vote for either party.
yeah,
Trump, because of course he thinks Donald Trump is a populist, but also Joe Biden because he thought Joe Biden's Israel policy was wrong. So you're absolutely right. And in fact, on YouTube, in the previous video, you can see me interviewing Joseph Olmert, the Israeli who fought in the Yom Kippur War. And Joseph says that, Democratic Party is in a tough spot. If you do something to please Arab voters in Detroit, that may displease Jewish voters in Philadelphia. So,
absolutely,
the Democrats, yes, you're right. The war in Israel, the Middle East came back to haunt them. And then also they have a very disparate coalition. They think all minorities will vote for us because we have championed minorities, we've championed workers, we have a party of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, of John F. Kennedy, of Lyndon B. Johnson, Social Security, and all of that is true. And of course, not to mention Barack Obama and Obamacare.
mm,
But what is also true is that a lot of minorities, especially if they are very Christian, are against abortion. A lot of
yeah,
the Latinos are,
absolutely,
and a lot of Christians and Muslims. They're very socially conservative, and they don't like the LGBTQ plus agenda of the Democrats. So the
that's
Democrats were trying to run with the hare and hunt with the hounds, and you can't do that forever.
absolutely. You're totally right. Uh, okay. What time is it? Okay, I have to go
Yeah.
in a few minutes.
So my question to you is: yes, all of that is good, but in Europe, there is this constant refrain that, oh, what is wrong with America? How is Donald Trump back? There seems to be a sense of shock. Would that be fair? And you see that even in the center right.
That shock is real, is visible in press, radio. My answer, because yesterday I had tons of interviews, I say, first of all, we should start thinking that US is not a country, but a continent, because there are 5 hours fly from
Yeah.
Washington, California, but in the middle you have Nebraska, Dakota, Arkansas. Those states are very different to the east or west coast, and
And even on the east, northeast, if you fly
absolutely,
from Maine to Mississippi, the culture changes.
absolutely, absolutely. So my point is that we tend to think that US, the Spanish media or European media only take or represent or survey the coast, the East Coast, the West Coast, but there are many United States inside the United States. That is the first point. And the second, and we haven't talked about that, and regrettably we are running out of time, but I want to listen to your opinion. Media tycoons as Elon Musk, Zuckerberg. This is very philosophical statement, but I'm
No,
worried.
no, Rupert Murdoch. Like, how can you forget him? Wall Street
Yes,
Journal and Fox News.
yes. I'm worried as for the health of liberal democracies in this bias, disinformation, law. It's happening in Latin America and Europe, everywhere. There is a magnificent book by Melendez analyzing 12 Latin American countries. In 11 out of 12, so
Mm-hmm.
almost all of them, there is a changing government. No matter if it's left or right, it's like the people
Got
is
it.
angry. It's just a volatile political atmosphere in which you want to change, but change in 4 years. And 4 years is nothing if you want to build
Mm.
a midterm economic improvement or growth. So my point is, again, in this bias media disinformation law, liberal democracies are suffering a very difficult time, and I cannot see or foresee a better future in which the media, that media is control, is putting some, of course, I don't want to be misunderstood, no censorship, but controlling in fake news, in terrorism, in child abuse. Those things should be controlled, and technologically it's not that difficult, neither that expensive. But these people have not been controlled at
No, but
all. European Union.
to take a step back, social media is a for-profit corporation. And the
Indeed.
duty of the CEO is, by law, if you interpret it narrowly, is to maximize returns to shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
So if they are just a platform, there is no duty on the part of Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk to do fact check, because if they do fact check and if they put in filters, then that means that that'll be added costs and some people may leave. Then there is the other thing, is that their algorithms make it very addictive. They create filter bubbles and echo chambers. So let's say you like Real Madrid and you watch 5 videos of Real Madrid, you'll get every single Real Madrid video throughout history, every
Absolutely.
single great goal. I like Barcelona. I watch Yamin Lamal, and then I'll get every single video of him, even at the age of 3. It's
Sure.
ridiculous. What they are doing is that
Sure.
that algorithm is pushing me into a narrower and narrower
Yeah,
and
but
narrower and
again,
narrower. And just one second, the longer I spend time on social media, the more information they have of me, of my location, of my viewing
absolutely.
history, the more ads they can sell me.
But
So there is a clash between, let's say, the duty of the media, and I run a nonprofit citizen journalism media, is to inform and
that's why I
educate.
love your project from the very beginning, from scratch.
Eh, Yeah, and the second clash with that is that, okay, inform and educate, and how do you, in a for-profit model, reconcile with maximizing returns for shareholders?
Sure, but there are still margin in between earning million, billion, and a bit less because again, technologically, it's not that expensive. It's not that expensive. So there are certain barriers. There
Yeah,
is a case in European Union now against
yeah,
Elon Musk. There was
yeah,
another case in Brazil. It's like
yeah.
everywhere. But
Mm,
citizens are not aware of that. And
mhm,
until they cannot understand that their democracies, their systems, their welfares could be at risk because this
mhm.
lack of sound control, again, don't misunderstand me, is not censorship, it's just control
No,
when,
it's not like Russia or China, but
sure,
it
it's
is.
control of
Yeah,
clear misinformation strategies,
yeah.
terrorism that use social media to portray their, or child abuse. These three things should be more closely controlled by these big
Mhm.
companies
All
because
right. Well, that's a philosophical, but the devil lies in the details. How will they? Why will they do it? What is the incentive? And so on and so forth. But the bottom line, let's go back to what we discussed. The view from Europe about Donald Trump's victory is unease, and it's unease through much of the political spectrum.
yes, actually, I think I didn't answer to your question about NATO, and I would like to
Hmm.
comment something. What happened in
And
the
I know you have to go after that, so we
is
this will be the last thing we discuss.
okay, regrettably,
Mhm.
yes, I'm running out of time. So NATO, what happened in the first Trump administration? He tried to persuade European countries to pay more for the bill, to spend more in defense. But the tricky thing is that Trump wanted European country to buy American weapons. He disliked the idea of a kind of European Union coordinated effort to put their armies to cooperate or to buy weapons together. So in this second administration, we might see another Trump attempt to say, hey, European guys, you have to pay the bill, you have to pay for the NATO. My fear, actually, I would say Ukraine fear is what will happen if the Republicans and Trump, precisely as they have already announced, they could reduce their support to Ukraine.
That has already happened de facto, because at the end of the day, the US cannot support two wars. It's supporting Israel, it's also supporting Ukraine. And the reality is, and Professor John Mearsheimer has said it many times, and so have many, many, many other experts, many military experts off the record, including American officers, is that Ukrainians have run out of shells. They just lack artillery shells, and Europe just simply does not produce enough to supply Ukraine. So sadly, tragically, Ukraine has been losing men, money, and material, and the Trump victory probably ends that tortured battle or tortured war. So it's tragic, but the reality is not just as simple as, okay, if only the US was to put in more money, Ukraine would be all right. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, I know it's more complex than that.
Yeah.
So dear Atul,
but the bigger question is NATO, of course, and European contribution to NATO and collective security. And already the people are cleverly raising questions about Article 5. Article 5 is, some people are saying it's not as absolute as it is. An attack on one is an attack on all. It may be open to interpretation by the president of the US.
Yeah.
And I think Europeans are, I presume, the same holds true for Spain as well, are a bit nervous about that. Certainly the Finns and the Swedes and the Poles are very nervous about it.
Not to mention my dear friend Estonians.
Exactly. Excellent. Francisco, always a pleasure. We'll continue this. There are lots of things to discuss. We'll have you back regularly. By the way, the School of Global and International Studies, which Francisco helped set up, is a partner of Fair Observer. We are proud partners of Francisco's school, and we will be doing more such interviews, not just on Europe, but also on Latin America, and of course, the view from Europe of the world. On that note, thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Atul. A pleasure.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.